Welcome to Quality Time with MoreSteam. I am your host, Dan Swartwout. The very first guest on Quality Time with MoreSteam was MoreSteam's president, Peg Pennington. The second guest was Razgaitis. That was almost 2 years ago, so I figured it was time to check in with Raz again. Raz is the co-founder and CEO of FloWater, a company on a mission to restore clean drinking water across the United States and really the entire world. Raz is also somebody I have known since the second grade. No joke, literally since the second grade in Miss Bloom's class at Barrington Elementary School. A lot has happened in the last 2 years. FloWater crossed 1 billion plastic bottles saved. As you will hear, the company has grown a lot. And Raz, well, he has a lot more to say. Please enjoy the following conversation as we welcome back to Quality Time with MoreSteam, Razgaitis. Today, we are lucky enough to be joined once again by Razgaitis, the co-founder and CEO of FloWater. Rich, welcome back to the show.
Dan, thank you. It's great to be on again. It's great to see you again.
It's been 2 years. You were the first guest on the show outside of the MoreSteam universe. Our first guest was MoreSteam president Peg Pennington, and you were the guest on the very second episode about 2 years ago. So glad you could make it back onto the show, especially as I've been watching and following you. You have been in so many media appearances over the last 2 years. I'm just so glad you could fit our little podcast in for a visit. So thank you so much.
I thought maybe this is just a redo because I didn't do a very good job the first time. I thought this was just take two.
Yeah,
first of all, that's pretty true that's pretty par for the course for me, which is I don't feel like I get it right the first time very often. I just keep going and eventually I get it right.
I just didn't have the heart to tell you for 2 years we needed to do it again.
Yeah. Well, since when did you not have the heart to tell me? I mean, since fifth grade, you've not been exactly varnished.
Well, Rich, welcome back to the show. Thank you for being here. If you could again,
it's good to be here.
Remind everyone who listened before and the people who are new listeners, tell them a little bit about FloWater, what it does, what its mission is. Of course, you're the co-founder and CEO, and it's been a big couple of years for FloWater.
Yeah, it's been a big couple of years. We were coming right out of COVID when I was talking to you last, and we were really on a reboot. And I'll share with you what we do and where we are, and then we'll go from there. But FloWater is a company that's focused on restoring drinking water across the United States. And this is a critical problem that most people do not recognize in totality. They're starting to recognize pieces of it. But I'll give you a few examples. Number one, the fundamental issue that we have in the US today is we have incredibly aged infrastructure. These water utility plants have been built 30, 50 years ago or longer. We have aged infrastructure and pipes that are 50, 60, 80 years old and older. And on top of that, we've had a plethora of chemical contamination in the form of nitrates for agricultural use, PFAS for manufacturing use, which PFAS are what make your rain jackets water repellent, for example, or your couches stain resistant. And what has happened is today in the US, there are over 50,000 chemicals in use in the United States today. Fewer than 100 of these are regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so the water that we consume today is effectively a chemical cocktail that is giving you an IV drip in the form of you sipping out of drinking water through the tap, that if it's unrefined or unfiltered or especially unpurified, you're effectively drinking all of these contaminants. And lead, people tend to think, lead is a Flint problem. Lead is a systemic crisis in the United States. There's 56% of Americans, including kids, in the last 5 years that have been drinking water with lead in it. The American Academy of Pediatrics says the only acceptable safe amount of lead for kids is 0 parts per billion. It's not 10, it's not 8, it's not 5 parts per billion, it's only 0. EWG, Environmental Working Group, a nonprofit, says the same thing. So these are just a couple of examples, microplastics in our drinking water, just it goes on and on. So people are hearing a little bit about bits and pieces, but we're really trying to solve a macro problem, because to solve water infrastructure in the United States will take 50 years and about $1 trillion. It'll be our kids' generation. If it got started today, it hasn't really even started today. And so what we've done is we've developed and designed proprietary pieces of almost like little mini water treatment plants that affix into any water line. So we got to have 300 feet of access to any water line, which is basically anywhere you can find a tap water source. And we plug them into these FloWater refill stations that have a very potent and proprietary purification system in it. So it takes tap water, which municipal water does the best job possible getting to you the water that they do. And then the FloWater systems are just a steroid shot, if you will, of improvements into that drinking water, where the systems extract all the bad stuff, pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides, lead, and then it adds the good stuff, things like electrolytes, minerals that make it taste good and bioassimilate better. And then it runs it through a coconut carbon filter, which makes it taste great. And the net result is you can get what we believe is the world's best tasting, cleanest drinking water anywhere you work, rest, and play, simply by building new infrastructure effectively, by just putting in the last 5 feet and changing the last 5 feet of that water line with a FloWater device. So I still advocate for policy, regulatory, infrastructure reform, and advocate that we need to start today. Otherwise, tomorrow will never come in the United States. But at the same time, we have a systemic issue in the United States that has to be solved immediately. And that's part of what we're doing. And we've done that now with close to 15,000 customers across the United States. We're in all 50 states. We're in lots of hotels, schools, gyms, corporations. Any business or commercial entity or public building is a FloWater candidate for an immediate solve to the drinking water crisis that exists everywhere.
Since you were on the show, Rich, and first of all, thank you so much for the reminder about FloWater. Since you were last on the show, FloWater crossed 1 billion plastic bottles saved, meaning that the use of FloWater meant that 1 billion non-reusable plastic water bottles were not used because of FloWater. What was it like to cross that billion bottle milestone? And what's the next big milestone for you and FloWater?
It was a great one, what was so fun about that for me, there were two things that were really fun. Number one, I remember the first bottle saved. I
the first one, the very first one.
The first bottle. I know the customer, the location, the very first kind of official bottle. And so, when you're at bottle number one saved and fill number one, by the way, one of the things I love about saving every bottle means it's also a bottle or, refillable vessel of water that someone has consumed. And in a world where 70% of Americans are chronically dehydrated, getting them to drink more water has a multitude of effects in terms of satiety and eating better and feeling better and sleeping better and performing better at work. But bottle one, that was cool to be able to go from bottle one, because then I remember back then I was like, wow, what if we could get to 10,000 bottles? That would be amazing. How in the world are we going to save 10? And then it was like, we got to 10,000 pretty quickly. And I was like, well, 1 million bottles would be amazing. So one is just the magnitude of the number. I think it's right around 1.3 billion bottles now. And kind of the next big step is 10 billion bottles saved. But then the other one, though, that I really loved about the 1 billion mark is this is a total team sport. This is a complete team sport. And seeing the team win on a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, seeing the team do something that we had been talking about for 3 or 4 years, because I put that 1 billion mantra out there about 5 years ago. And it seemed impossible at the time, because we were like, it wasn't impossible, but it just seemed Herculean, because I think we were at 100 million and we said, all right, billion. And seeing them win and do something that seemed unobtainable or at times difficult to obtain was the second real big highlight for me, because this is a team sport. Yeah, I could have gotten us to 10,000 on my own with one other person. We probably did, maybe 50,000, but that's the throttling effect of Well, when you're only one person or two people or three people, there's no scalability and you lack the impact that you can have. And so seeing the impact of my teammates and what they did and the great work day in, day out, because there's a lot of grinding in everyone's job. There's a lot of grinding. And so the milestones you really got to celebrate because it's the result of doing 10,000 things well over and over again that gets you to an outcome like 1 billion bottles saved.
I'm glad you talked about that, doing something over and over again, because I want to talk a little bit about some of your processes, the processes that you have in place. We talked before about how your company had to scale down a little bit because of COVID and then rebuild itself. How did you redesign the team and your core processes as you were coming out of COVID and almost recreating, rebuilding the team that you had before?
Yeah, I'll contextualize your diplomacy too, because we scaled down a little from 90 people down to 30.
See, Rich, this is how I've changed since 5th grade. That's how I could wait 2 years to tell you I didn't have the heart.
Where did this come from? I mean, yeah, this is what getting a law degree and then working at a corporate environment with customers will change all sorts of tenor and how you deliver messages. So, we went into COVID with 90, we left with around 30, and it was kind of life support to a certain degree. I mean, not at various points, it felt like it was life support, and candidly, it was. And so we had a very unique opportunity to do it again in terms of how do we rebuild, who do we hire. I'll share with you a couple of things that we did differently the second go around. And it's, not exactly the way that I wanted to have a redo. I would have rather just been a guest on the podcast a second time 2 years later as my redo, as opposed to going through COVID, because it's very painful. Some of the people you lose, some of the people you have to let go as a CEO, the worst day of your life. I know it doesn't seem like this if you're perhaps an employee of an organization where CEOs have to do layoffs or terminations, whether they're for or not for cause. It's hands down the worst day of my life, or business life rather, when that has to happen. It might not feel that way to the recipient of it, but you feel a big responsibility. So it was with a lot of kind of sobriety, so to speak, and rethinking how do we rebuild people and processes to get to the next level. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of that. One, in terms of the hiring process, up until not too long ago, maybe about a year and a half ago, I used to interview every person that we brought into the organization. And I do a lot of that going into COVID, but once you're scaling from like 50 to 90 people in a period of a couple of years into capital raising, you're dealing with customers and product strategy, and you're flying to Korea and trying to deal with, various manufacturing things, you just only have so much time. And so we put together a more regimented interview process, really focusing on behavioral outcomes and performance that people had generated. So a lot of times it's very easy to get tempted by candidates, and they're in the interview process talking about all the things that they can do. What I like to do is the best indicator. I like to use the barometer of behavioral outcomes that have been proven over time. And another way of saying that is the best indicator of future performance is past behavior.
Sure.
Hands down. And so finding the right people, I look for two things when I'm hiring. Everyone's got, an Inc. magazine or Fast Company, or it's all these great articles on like the top 10 things that I look for, these 18 items or 12 things never to do. It makes for really catchy headlines. I don't know, maybe I've even written one of those articles and I was kind of forced to create like a top 10 list. I'm sure I do have one out there, but I'm making fun of myself at this point, but I really simplify it and look at two things. Number one is the competency factor, which is, are they the top 20th percentile in what they do? And have they been able to consistently demonstrate that? That's a must have. But then the second one is the chemistry factor. And I find very few articles, podcasts, when I listen to people speak and I read about the dynamics of forming a team. I don't feel like I hear people talk about the chemistry factor very often. And that's where we do hear, do you know where we do hear a lot about the chemistry factor and what category? Does one come to mind?
All I can think about, it's big right here in Central Ohio because Love is Blind is taking place. So I'm talking
Oh,
romance, love. Is that the
that's
chemistry factor?
hilarious.
Is that the
That's
chemistry
actually
factor you're
that's
talking
I would like to
about?
I would like to sign up for my third edition of your podcast just to talk about the romance dating side and all of the lessons that I've learned along the way, mostly by failure. But no, I was actually the second one that you would have guessed would have been team sports, particularly. I thought you were going there because of Ohio State football. You hear about chemistry all the time on a team, right? Like
Sure.
just the magic of what happens on a field, generating momentum off the field. And, IUs, I think is that might be the best use case, an example of talent, hidden talent. I used to have a football coach say, ordinary men doing extraordinary things. That was his mantra to us. And we were all guys that wanted to play D1 ball, ended up playing D3 college ball. Some of them could have played D1 ball. Others probably shouldn't have been playing high school ball even. So you get this mushkambul of athletes on this team. But kind of that principle was ordinary men doing something extraordinary. And then you take the chemistry factor IU, as just a great example of, well, you take people that are maybe underrated talent that have great faculties and great potential, but also are maybe undervalued because they didn't get 5 stars in some rating report. And then you throw in the chemistry dynamic of it, great things happen. And so those are two things, competency and chemistry. Another way I kind of describe chemistry is we are all working with these people in our life where I don't have my phone on me, but you like when someone calls you and you pick up and you see on the caller ID who it is, we all have those people. We're like, oh, can't wait to answer that. Or, hey, can I call you back in 2 minutes? And then we have those people who are like, oh crap, like voicemail, or like, I don't want to deal with this right now, or I can't deal with this problem, or this is going to be a 2-hour conversation. It's like almost like a vagus nerve response. Chemistry is the FES energy around, yep, got it. Chris Licardi, my COO, is calling me. Oh, Kristen Holtis, she's my VP of finance, or a technician in the field. Like, I want to engage with this because we have chemistry, and part of that, it has, a multitude of sub-factors to it. Those are two things that we really focused on building. You go for a plan. I'll give you just a third example and then let you ask more about the process stuff if you want to. But I think I used to, many years ago, and I probably even early in my FloWater career, 13 years ago, I used to think I think this is just a bit of hubris or naivete or both. I used to think, oh, I can instill in someone my values as a CEO of a company. Like if they're really competent, but then I have these values, and sometimes these values just get overused and they don't mean anything. But, a force of nature energy or creator energy is necessary, or a mission orientation is really critical. I used to think, oh, I can convince them. I'm like good at selling and like casting the vision and expressing like enthusiasm that will inspire them to change. The reality is now what I do is I try to find people that align with our vision, mission, and values, and then bring them into the fold. Like my lens is, who are those people that are already my people? They're just not part of my team yet. Get those people rather than try to convince those people, hey, you should care about this. That doesn't work. I can do that tactically for a day, a week, maybe a month. I can't change someone's DNA and kind of their wiring. They can change it on their own. People modify, people adjust, and sometimes you can spark that, but at the end of the day, that's an inside job.
Rich, I want to focus on something you just talked about, especially as it relates to chemistry. The most recent guest we had on the show was Joe Baker, who's the COO of Veritext. And during that conversation, we were talking about leading by data, following the data, and sometimes having to follow by hunch. It seems like it would be difficult to have data on somebody being a chemistry fit. So how do you figure that out during the interview process? Is it just a hunch? Are you ever wrong? Is there something you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm wrong. But let me just start with, I'm wrong all the time. I like on a lot of things. Like, let's get that one out of the way. For sure, I'm wrong. Well, this goes back to the best indicator of future behavior is past performance.
Okay.
One thing that is a proxy, it's not an absolute, but if someone has been successful in team dynamics. Just even playing team sports. I love athletes, people that have worked in the military. You have a common vision, a common goal, a common objective. The business unit or the military unit or your deployment unit, whatever it is, the team unit is relying upon you to deliver, but also to work within the interface of a team. Those are a couple good proxies for, hey, are these people good team players? So, it could be other things that they do, whether that's with church or nonprofits, or, someone has 7 siblings. Like, these are all little proxies around, you got like 4, 5, 7 siblings. Either you're really bad at teamwork or you're really good at it, right? So just proxies. And then part of it is a matter of spending time and establishing connections. So I'll just give you an example. I mean, we try to use as much quantitative data as possible. I'll tell you something that I learned early in my career. I made a mistake with this. I used to, when I was younger, I would overlook the competency piece. Like, I remember my first job in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was running this pharmaceutical company. I didn't know what I was doing. I was 28. I mean, at the time, I thought I knew everything, and I overcompensated for not knowing by just telling everybody I know what I'm doing. But I didn't know what I was doing. They were the unfortunate recipient of like having to just learn with me. And so I remember, I would overlook some of the competency because I just felt this. I just had a hunch of like, I feel this real pull towards them. Like, I like them. I like their energy or whatever it is. So that's what I would not do. Like, that's why I start with this competency, which is they have to have these disciplines. It doesn't mean that they have to be the world's best in the very thing that you're hiring them. It does mean, though, for me, it does mean that they need to have enough quantifiable bench strength and faculties and domain expertise that's transferable if it wasn't the exact thing that they were doing before. So I start with that. And then the chemistry piece of it is, hey, am I going to love working with this person? I'll give you an example of something that I do with every direct report or senior leader that comes in the organization. I used to not do this. I do this now all the time. I will not hire somebody without going out to dinner with them. After all the interviewing, even if I have to fly them out, or if I have to fly to them, in some cases, usually I fly them out, I will do dinner. And there's a couple of reasons why. And I've caught a few times, I got the radar during dinner. There is something off here, and I didn't listen to it. And I later, within months, realized I was right. And that was the radar. But I've now also nixed or accelerated a number of people as a result of kind of that final chemistry step. And there's a variety of things that you find out through that. I mean, sometimes it's kind of amazing what some people will say at dinner over a drink. I never drink when I'm interviewing candidates and bringing them out, but some surprising reason, there's a number of people that feel really comfortable, after opening up after a beer or two. And I have no judgment if they do that, but it's kind of interesting what they say. And, those are the things that you learn about, personal behaviors, habits, values, family, what they do value, what they don't value. And so some of that chemistry alignment has to do with value alignment as well.
I find this fascinating because as I look at process improvement and continuous improvement, you've essentially refined this interview process from experiments, trials, successes, failures to get it to where it is now that you feel really confident with what you're doing. Is that fair?
Well, I think it's, yes. I mean, I feel like we're making good progress on it. And I would say when we hire someone in a corporate, I hate to use the word corporate. I'm just trying to like use descriptors and adjectives that just normal people use, but kind of the corporate environment or the headquarters. I call it 4 walls in Denver. That's not interfacing with customers because I'm so customer centric that I tend to just try to get out in the market and live with the people that are living with customers because that's where the magic happens. But it's certainly critical to have the corporate team or the HQ team that's supporting all of those things. The on the corporate side or like non-sales side, I would say we have a really, really high, much higher success rate of fit. And that's a lot of it, right? Which is, do the competency skills line up and then do they mesh with the team? And I'll tell you one thing that I do with candidates that I task them with that I think does help people self-select. I'll come back to that in a second. The second one is on the sales side. Sales is really tricky. And the reason is, yeah, it's a team sport, but you know, you're the wideout, and like you got to catch a lot of passes, or you're the outside linebacker where you're responsible for a big portion of the field and driving the defense. And I think that's very much where you really only find out when you see if people put points on the board. I think on the sales side, it's just generally, you know, I've run and also been on boards and advisors to big sales companies or sales focused companies. And someone will always surprise you in both directions. Someone you think is going to be a ringer, someone you don't think is going to be a ringer. But if you focus on those foundational things, and you know, someone that's constantly been a part of President's Club, if they're a winner, if someone has sold Comcast and they have been wildly successful in selling Comcast internet, you know,
Right.
and door knocking and cold calling, that's a great proxy, that is a really hard job. Like kind of being in a corporate job and being on the phone. Like I'm not saying our job and my team's job isn't hard, but you want to talk about like grinding, you know, cold calling, selling knives door to door.
That's what I was about to say. I was about to say, now I'm going to pull something back from the past and talk about you in high school selling Cutco knives. I was going to exactly say that. And you were always grinding back then.
You know, it's so funny. I remember I once got a C or a D in participation in a class in high school. And it was a class that I was, you know, some business, you know, general business class. And I remember contesting it at the end of the year. I was shocked that I got a D. And it drove my grade down to a C. And I was really upset. And I remember maybe this is like freshman year of college. I remember talking to the professor after, and I was like, hey, I really want you to help me understand this D or F I got in class participation. And he said, I don't know how to say this to you other than to tell you, you working in your daytimer all day long and all throughout class is not class participation. Because I was like penciling out all my appointments and my schedule and how many calls I had to do. Like I literally had one of these huge, it was like almost pre-Franklin Covey planner. I had these daytimers. You know, anyone under the age of 40 has no idea what this is. It sounds like an analog phone, but yeah, so I was kind of a grinder in that. But you learn a lot by, you know, if you can get 1,000 no's and keep going, like you've just developed a grit factor. It helps you develop a grit factor. And there's some data. I'm going to get back also to one of the questions that I ask the candidate that's interviewing with us that I think might be helpful. But there's a lot of data that shows when you do a hard thing and you finish that hard thing or accomplishment, the next thing that's harder is actually easier. I mean, easier than the last hard thing that you accomplished. And then the reverse is true though, which is if you do a hard thing and you fail at it, that next easier thing is actually harder than that prior hard thing that you just tried to do. And so it's basically like a spiral up or a spiral down. And you know, that's why I think probably growing up, I don't know, maybe our parents realized, maybe we didn't need all this research to come out on Instagram and TikTok that tells us the stuff that our parents already knew, which is why they didn't want us to quit sports. You know, like they're like, no, you're going to finish what you started, right? And there's a grit element to it for sure. And that builds and grows over time. And that's one of the things that's tough. Like when you're hiring on the sales side, it's always hard to kind of determine, well, what is someone's grit factor? And because I feel like almost anyone could be, I feel a little bit like selling like marathon running, which is marathon running. Okay, not everybody could run a marathon, but I got to tell you, a lot of people could that choose not to, but they could. There's nothing innate. It's just a lot of training. And it's kind of a question of, well, how much are you willing to put up with in terms of frustration, training, you know, time to get to that goal, right? But a lot of people could do it and they just choose not to, and that's fine. But, you know, sometimes people look at people that run marathons, they're like, oh, that's like really unusual. It's like, well, it's only on you, not because they're superhuman. It's just, they just happen to say, well, I want to do this. And then one of the things I go back to in the candidates is every candidate, I ask them to do this. This is new learning for me, is I want them to know, in the pharmaceutical industry, there's this thing called fair balance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that? Do you kind of have a definition of what fair balance is in the pharmaceutical industry? I have kind of like
we talked about this on the last show 2 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, I'd forgotten that. Oh, that's right. Okay, you're right. We did cover that. Good memory. This is why you went to law school and were able to get through it, and I couldn't. This is why I'm just a business guy.
Yeah, so, you got to talk about the good and the bad, right?
You got to talk about the good and the bad. But here's the add-on question from last time that I didn't have people do before, which is I tell them, hey, your homework is go talk to 2 or 3 other people that you interviewed with and ask them what their worst day is like. Ask them about me on my worst day, what I'm like. Ask them about the 3 things that they find most frustrating about the company. And so I used to think of it as the fair balance, like, hey, this might be good for you, but here are the side effects or whatever it is. And that was like a disclosure. Now I look at it as more of a process of discovery where they can start to hear and learn by, both deductive reasoning as well as dialogue with other people in the organization, because a lot of this just ends up being about fit. I've had numerous people, super talented, that have come into the company over the last 13 years. It just didn't work. And they went on to do great things. And is that me? Was that them? I don't know. I mean, like I've got my own postmortem for each, but part of it is just about fit, like the dynamic, the time, the place, the structure, the strategy, the people, right?
Thanks, Raz. It's the right fit, dynamic, time, and place for this short break. MoreSteam's enterprise process improvement platform includes the tools, training, and software you need to transform your organization into a problem-solving powerhouse. Join the ranks of Fortune 500 companies that trust MoreSteam for their enterprise process improvement. Visit MoreSteam.com to learn more. Also, I want to take just a moment to thank you for listening to Quality Time with MoreSteam. You can email the show at qualitytime@moresteam.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast service. And now back to my conversation with Raz, Rich Razgaitis. You are very customer-centric. As you were scaling your business back up after COVID from 30 to 90, from 100 million bottles saved to 1 billion bottles saved, and now 1.3, how did you go out and develop the processes to learn the voice of the customer, what the customer wanted, and how you knew exactly what it was the customer wanted, as opposed to what you thought maybe the customer wanted?
Well, are you game for an example of where we really screwed this up? Learn?
I am so game for an example just like that, because not everyone's willing to share that example, Rich.
Oh, I use this internally all the time with the team as a reminder. This is on me too, by the way. Like this is my one of, I could pull out of a large bag number of good stories of lessons learned over the years. But so I'll tell you one example of where we followed a really good, we thought good, and also pretty conventional process that delivered a terrible outcome. And it wasn't catastrophic, obviously. But then I'll also tell you the way I do this now. And I actually have a recent example from last week, where I spent 15 hours last week on customer-centric voice of the customer. So I have a refill station that's over in the corner. I can't move my camera over there, but I don't know, maybe if you're at the point 2 years later where you're throwing in B-roll and like face tuning me and everything, then you could show the whole refill station.
You can hold up a bottle right now if you'd like.
It doesn't have the slogan. It doesn't have the slogan on it. So there's on the refill station, someone will see an image. It says FloWater at the top. It's attractive. We tried to design like what would Apple design in a water dispensing device, a water hardware refill station. And then at the bottom, we have this big panel, all this real estate. And, I remember pulling the team together, and we used to have an old one, which is like better than bottled water with your own bottle. So we're like, okay, well, we need to update. That was like the early on one. So I was like, all right, let's pull everyone together. We had, I don't know, 6 people, 8 people in the company at the time. We need to come up with a new slogan. You know, like Dasani has theirs, Aquafina has theirs, Fiji has theirs. Everyone has a tagline on their beverage. So I was like, well, we gotta have ours. And let's refresh real estate. So long story short, we got the group together. We hired a design and a small agency, a brand. They were experts, by the way, at this. Like they did it for like a real small side project for us. But this was like a blue chip in California, Southern California agency. And we did all this market testing, feedback, A/B testing on, you know, like the interweb, brought in focus groups, and we came up with the best tagline that has ever hit the history of the hydration category. And it was naturally brilliant water. So we put it on all of our refill stations. Quite embarrassing, it's still on there. It's not because it's bad, but it's not good. That's what makes it bad to me. We're actually moving that away from that now. So I remember going out into the market years ago after we did this. I go out to the market and, you know, we got it in 100 locations, and I just go talk to customers, observe. I'm like sitting at a bench by it or a chair. I'll ask them like, hey, what'd you like? What's memorable? I remember coming back to the office. I was like, guys, we have a huge problem with this branding. They're like, well, what is it? Like, do people hate it? And I was like, no, people don't hate it. No one knows what it means. No one knows what it is. No one remembers it. And when I asked them, like, well, how do you think of this water? Or how would you describe it? What we wanted them to do is say, this is naturally brilliant water. It sounds so corny now. I'm just like, well, how did we come up with this? How am I responsible for this debacle? But I am. And I was like, guys, this is the world's worst tagline. No one's remembering this. No one's describing it as this. I was like, but what's interesting is when I asked them, how do they describe the product? They said, this is the world's best tasting water. Tastes like clouds. I've never tasted water better than this before. I feel like it's raining from the heavens. Like, but the one adage that kept coming up over and over and over again was world's best tasting water. They're like, this is the best. So I go back to the team. I'm telling this about Naturally Brilliant. I was like, the customers already know what our brand mantra is. They're the ones that are saying it by definition. This is our tagline, world's best tasting water. And so we're not, for a variety of reasons, we're not actually going to put exactly that on the bottom panel. But ever since then, we did hinge all of our marketing position, our brand positioning. We extra hinged it around taste and world's best tasting water specifically as an adage. And that was kind of an example of, well, hey, we kind of did it the standard way, the way I learned at business school, the way I learned at big companies, the way I learned at, you know, when I was running a $100 million consumer packaged goods company. I followed the playbook, but what I didn't follow and what a lot of companies miss is, well, actually, it's the whole, will the dogs eat the dog food? You probably know that whole story.
Oh, yeah.
Like what are the customers really saying? And do they really care? And then once the problem with a lot of us in the business world, life is not a business problem, it's a human problem, is we make a decision, then we defend that decision. But if you care about outcomes the most, winning, then it becomes very easy to say, I don't care about that decision. If it's the wrong decision, I want to get to the right decision as quickly as possible, which is why it was super easy for me after talking to 100 customers to say, hey guys, this is insane. We gotta like change all of our positioning around what the customers are saying, taste and trust, taste and trust. Those were intentional, but we didn't have quite the adage around it. And so what I do now, I'll just give you an example. I spent a ton of time in the field with customers, ask a lot of questions. I don't go with like surveys. I ask simple questions. What do you like? What do you not like? What caused you to buy this? What was the trigger? What was the problem you were trying to solve? Did you see a problem? What's the most, one of the ways I find out, like, what do you not like? That's like an okay question. And I ask that. A better question is, whenever you use a FloWater unit, is there anything that's frustrating to you? Or you're like, oh, I wish I could change this. Or when you deal with us kind of corporately, administratively, billing, calls, et cetera, like what's kind of annoying? Like I'm trying to tease out, because they might say, oh, like, you don't really need to improve or anything. But then if you ask someone like, what's kind of frustrating about this or annoying about this? You're like, oh, like actually this is kind of annoying. Like I have to send this email 3 times and whatever, and I don't get a response or an auto response. So last week I spent, 15 hours talking to the sales team, and I took 10 pages of notes of what are customers saying, what's friction for you, what do you find frustrating about the company. They're the voice of the customer. If I want to know what's going on in the field, I talk to technicians, I talk to customers all the time. And that's how I learn everything. I mean, it's not, sometimes people think, oh, like you're architecting, all the like CEOs are just like sitting behind four walls architecting. I mean, yeah, like, and then Steve Jobs was a visionary, he's brilliant because not because customers say I want an iPhone, but because he knew how customers and consumers thought. That's what made him brilliant. And so people think, oh, like, well, he just knew intuitively. Well, no, he actually did. He understood human behavior and consumer sentiment. And that's how he was able to identify where the world was heading, not because someone says, I want an iPhone with this interface in an app store.
Rich, I want to get back to the idea.
Calling me Raz instead of Rich.
I know. Raz.
Well, Matt, don't say it like that. I mean, just say it normal, man. Just hey,
Raz. Okay.
Dan, thank you.
Thank you. Raz, I want to get back to this idea of the world's best tasting water. You're in 50 states, all 50 states. You've got thousands of locations. How do you ensure that quality from Oregon to Maine, from Florida to Michigan, that whenever they go to a FloWater station, they are getting that exact quality that you say that they want and say that it is?
Standardized filters and purification within the device. And so, I'll just give you an example. There's certain markets in the US that do have cleaner water. The metaphor that I use is in the United States, some communities' water is so dirty, it's like smoking Marlboro Reds. Yet the nicer communities or the better water quality communities are like smoking Marlboro Lights. We're all smoking. It's just a matter of whether we're smoking unfiltered or Reds or Lights or somewhere in between. So what I would say about that is, there's certain communities where you could use lesser filters or lighter purification, so to speak, and still get a great result. The way to standardize it is the standardized extraction of the impurities in drinking water, as well as the enhancements, like what happens in FloWater is electrolytes, increase in alkalinity, a dozen trace minerals, 4 key electrolytes, about a dozen trace minerals, and then this taste filter, this coconut carbonate, which makes it taste like the clouds, or however consumers describe it, the world's best tasting water. So standardizing that and not deviating. So along the way, there's a part of our system is called reverse osmosis. I'll give you an example. This is so funny. My social media manager and my VP of marketing are like, hey, can you think of any topics of like lessons learned and things that you did along the way? And I get on camera, and if I know I can edit myself, I can't think of one thing. But now, like, we're talking, there's like all these things that are coming to mind. And this is another great one.
That's my skill. That's my skill as an interviewer, Raz. That's not just random chance. That's my skill as an interviewer.
Well, then I feel like your politeness has paid off. Your the progress on your diplomacy is really yielding out for you. I will say you are a great interviewer, by the way. It's
You're very kind.
You are, no, really, truly, you're great at it. And these are always my most fun podcasts. But when I look at, we have a set of RO filters in it, and there's some byproduct water requires a drain line. A lot of people are like, oh, we don't want a drain line. Like, just replace a filter that doesn't replace that RO that doesn't require a drain line. Kind of the gist of it is, we have said no to all of these cases, and the reason why is it's not standardized. And so by saying no to lots, like death by 1,000 cuts, or to kind of use like a more, I suppose, grotesque analogy, but the expression's like cutting the tail off a dog a piece at a time. But that's kind of like what it feels like from a corporate perspective or a brand perspective. You really diminish or dilute the brand to where it stands for nothing. And so saying no to a lot of things along the way is really saying yes to something bigger, more substantial, more defensible, more ownable. And that's really what we've tried to fixate on doing. And there's been heartburn and headaches and pain along the way, because when you're a scrappy entrepreneurial company, you're growing. We're 4 times now the size of where we were in 2022. So we've grown considerably since then, and over the last couple of years since we talked to you last. But, it's hard to say no to these things because they're always a gamble. You don't know. I mean, you hope it'll plan out that way. You think it's the right thing to do. But between now and then, I remember I was in a early stage VC company, and there was an argument at this table. I was a young exec. I was like 25 at the time, and everyone was like 35 to 60 years old. I was just happened to be the young buck at this table at the management meeting. And one of the guys was, we were under cash flow constraints during 9/11. All these companies were going out of business. And I remember one of the guys saying, like, this is not the right decision for the long term. We're fighting for our lives, by the way, at this time. He's like, this is not the right decision for the long term. Another guy using very colorful language, which I cannot use on a podcast, especially with you in Columbus, Ohio, and all these nice people who have learned from your diplomacy, F words not to say. Like, he threw down the most aggressive F-bomb saying, hey, without the short term, there is no long term. And he was right, and it's like, both are right? You're always making this balance of, well, what's the right thing for the long term once we make it through this? And then how do we make sure that we make it through the short term? And that's an example of one that we didn't deviate from, but it's not been without pain along the way. It's not been without a compromise or a sacrifice to revenues or faster profits, or these are all trade-off decisions, and they're all difficult. And obviously we don't make them all right.
Rich, I know you've got a hard stop here, so I want to touch on a couple things quickly before you go. First of all, Ernst & Young named you Entrepreneur of the Year for the Mountain West. What was that like? Tell me quickly, because there's one more thing I want to get to.
Okay, 60 seconds. What was cool is I don't love the title of it, because I of all the Entrepreneur of the Year award winners, I didn't meet one person that was one person. They all had a huge team that, varying degrees. So it was cool because it was a team win around us amplifying this business and this mission and this movement. Certainly I felt very proud to be the recipient on behalf of the team of the acknowledgement of good work that's been done. But also I look at that and I say, gosh, that was a nice milestone. It was a lot of fun for the team to celebrate that. Next day is, all right, next, like, we got 10 billion bottles to save.
All right. And then I also want to talk about, how you hit #1 on an Amazon chart with your book, Clean Water is Awesome. No, Really, by Razgaitis. Tell me about writing the children's book. What were you hoping to accomplish with that? And how did you feel when it went to #1?
The children's book really was a project around trying to create dialogue with kids and things that matter substantively to the future of our country, and to some degree, no hyperbole, to the future of humanity. I mean, you look at, we don't have time to go through it, but the absence of hydration or dehydration is a massive issue in the United States, and there are all these byproducts to it. So I could do a whole hour on what that actually means and why it's so hidden, and why we get big marketing dollars from big packaged goods companies that kind of like, are driving their agenda around selling packaged good products. So one is trying to get the conversation with kids, but then part of it is you get to a conversation with adults through kids oftentimes. Like, the way I learn things in many ways in my life, part of it is like head on, I'm like unidirectional or bidirectional with other adults. Some of it is like through my kids, like what matters to them. What are they asking about? What's meaningful? And so it was a really fun project to do that. By the way, the one thing I want to share about this book too is not only am I donating, I've been donating every dollar of not just profit, but every dollar of revenue I've generated from the book, I've given away. I'm losing every dollar we sell on books. Rich Razgaitis, lose money. But it's not
so
really
when I bought my
because
copy, I wasn't lining your pockets when I bought my copy.
No, actually, but this is the cool tie back, by the way, which is like, I'm not, like I say, losing money, like more playfully. What I'm doing is I'm taking the $1 that you spent, or $10 in a book, I'm taking my own $10, and that $20 is going to a water-based 501c3, a nonprofit. The most recent donation that I did was with Dig Deep, which is focused on providing drinking water wells to people in need that do not have access to clean drinking water or drinking water at all. We actually did a partnership with them. I'll send you a link on what we did with Dig Deep in Navajo Nation to get drinking water to the people in the Navajo Nation at a kind of a medical center of sorts for kids. And it's a very powerful story, but it's something that feels good to be able to further the cause around providing clean drinking water. So the kind of my pitch for the book is, if you buy a book or 5 or 10 and you give them away, you get the opportunity to teach a kid something about water and sustainability and the importance of clean drinking water. But then you also contribute dollars to helping kids in need actually get that clean drinking water, unrelated to FloWater. It's just nonprofits that I believe in that are doing good work.
Rich, I know you've got to go. Thank you so much for joining us. I did not get to ask you about how wonderful and delicious the steak dinners I cook are. We'll have to wait for that in a couple years when you join us again on the show.
I look forward to it. They are, you know, I'm going to end on this. Actually, can I have 60 seconds to tell a story?
Of course.
Okay. I remember 2 years ago when we had dinner, not the last time, but like 2 or 3 visits ago when I was back to Columbus. So I'm in Denver and periodically back in Columbus. And I've really tried to make a point of, and you've tried to make a point of connecting every time we're there, because this has been a great relationship to really rekindle in many ways. Because there was about a 15, 20 year period where you were doing your thing, I was doing my thing.
Right.
So I've been single for about 10 years, and I think I can count on my hand, like one hand, how many times someone has made me dinner. I'm excluding my daughter, Zoe, who now moved back in with me, who made me an amazing dinner last week, by the way. But I remember when I came to your house for dinner, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and you said, hey, why don't you just come to the house? Because I'm like, oh, let's go somewhere, or I'll bring dinner over. Like, let me bring carry out. You don't have to worry about it. Because that's the mode I've always just been used to. You're like, no, I'm going to cook. We're going to grill steaks in the backyard. We're going to hang out. It's one of the most fun evenings. For you, it's maybe just another Tuesday, but like, you made my world, man, in doing that. But part of it was I left, and I've told this story to so many people. You have no idea. I told the story of how meaningful and impactful it is for someone to do something as simple, but also I think of it as generous, to take their time and their energy and their talents and do something as simple as cook a meal for someone. And I've had very few people like cook me meals. I'm always like the organizer of it, or I'm bringing the food. I don't want to bother somebody. And like, maybe, you know, I need more in my life where I just let people do some of that stuff for me. But sometimes it's just a matter of someone volunteering and saying to do it. So the steak dinners are great, but the kind of affect behind that, it's amazing. You probably had no idea that I like walked away feeling like this is such a moment for me, but it really was. It was very meaningful for me. I've told that story many times since then.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. No, I was just hoping that you really liked the steak, because I take pride in my backyard grilling, but this is even better. So thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot.
Dan, it's great seeing you again.
It's great to see you, Rich.
Love the podcast that you do. I'm proud of you and the family that you've built. It's been Tasha, you know, getting to know her mostly virtually through Facebook and seeing your guys' stories. It's just so inspirational to me. And then also your daughter, just seeing her grow and develop, and then seeing you two interact. The last thing I'll end on is when I go back to Indiana, my college there, or I go back to Columbus, you know, sometimes people are like, oh, like, what's it like to be doing that? You know, because I travel around the world. And I suppose if you just were planted in one place and kind of day in, day out, or maybe you're a teacher and you just think, oh, like, this looks so exotic. And I suppose in some cases it is, and I'm grateful for it. But, you know, I look at it, and when I come back to Ohio or Indiana, I look at all these people that I think of as heroes. They are my heroes that are building a family, contributing to their community. They're showing up every day. Like, they're grinding away. And it's maybe not so visible. Like, they're not on all the media appearances of like, hey, I took my kid to soccer today, like live on Channel 6. Let's watch Dan just go through the motions of like being a great dad. But truly, like, that stuff is the stuff that matters. Like, dads that show up, you know, I mean, being a dad, I just feel a real passion around men have a responsibility to show up, and they don't always do it, but they have a responsibility to do it. And it's cool to see you represent that. And I know you're not looking for affirmations, but that is, when I see Dan, I don't see JD. I don't see a super brilliant guy. I don't see comedian. Yeah, there are all those things. When I see you and I think of you, there is a damn good man who has built a great family and is doing meaningful work in his community. That's what I see. And all these other things like steak dinners and your comedic relief, those are just bonuses.
You're very kind, Rich. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for the kind words. Of course, I'm just thrilled about everything you've accomplished as well. And literally, I was just trying to make a gag about cooking you steaks, but I really appreciate all of the kind
you got
words.
A little philosophy lesson. Yeah.
Rich, thank you so much for being on the
who
show.
Knows what happens if you bring up Tremont Bakery donuts next time? Like, who knows where I'll go with that one? It's not just going to be about the donut. I can assure you that.
Rich, thank you so much for being on the show
right.
and staying a little past your hard break. So thank you so much for that as well. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Quality Time with MoreSteam. Thanks again.